All right, y'all, I just got the okay for us to start. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to have you all here. So my name's Zwaan. I'll introduce myself and then tell everybody a little bit about what we'll be discussing today and let the panelists introduce themselves. But good morning. I'm Zwaan. I'm the Georgia Field Coordinator with Moms Clean Air Force. We're a community of over 1 million moms and dads united in the fight for clean air and climate action to protect our children's health and future. And today we're here to talk about the air quality in Georgia and some air monitoring EPA grants. So just for a tiny bit of background, on November 3rd, 2022, the EPA announced $53.4 million for grant awardees to undertake air monitoring projects in 37 states, funded by the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan. And these grant selections further the goal of President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, which directs that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments to overburdened communities that face disproportionately high and adverse health and environmental impacts. So by enhancing air monitoring and encouraging partnerships with communities, the EPA is investing in efforts to better protect people's health, and particularly in underserved communities. So excitingly, in Georgia, 2 organizations were awarded grants, Environmental Community Action Incorporated and the Center for Sustainable Communities, whose president we have with us on the call today. Really wonderful to have you, Garry. So that being said, let's break it up. So I'm not the one doing all the talking. So I figured if each 3 of our organizations could introduce yourselves and just give us your name and your organization and, just an aspect of your work that you're bringing to the table today, or anything else you'd like to share about yourself. And maybe, Garry, we can go to you first.
Okay. Hi, morning. Thanks so much for having me here. Garry Harris. I'm Managing Director for the Center for Sustainable Communities. We're all about making communities greener, cleaner, healthier, safer, and more climate resilient. And we do that through an equity and environmental justice lens. And we're located both in Hampton Roads, Virginia, as well as at Atlanta, Georgia. And our aim is to make a more equitable, resilient, sustainable, and just world for all. And the way that we do that, we use something called just science, i.e. justice science. My background, I'm kind of a scientist, advocate, educator, activist kind of person. So I can combine it all together into something we call just science, i.e. Looking at environmental problems, particularly air pollution and water pollution, etc., through an environmental justice lens, but also applying science, technology, engineering to drive out remedies as well, which is the exact same thing we do here with our air pollution project.
Thank you so much. And I guess we'll just go around. Next on my screen is Dr. Ann, if you want to introduce yourself. If you need a minute, we can come back to you also. No rush. It looks like there might be just some slight audio issues. I'll go to Dr. Neha first, and we will circle right back to you, Dr. Ann.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Neha Pathak. I'm an internal medicine and lifestyle medicine physician here in Atlanta, Georgia. Super excited to be with you all and really excited to learn more about what you're up to, Garry. But I work in the medical journalism field more. So I've been a primary care doctor my entire life. But once I realized the scope of our upstream health issues, where I can't really do much more than I can't do anything to prevent illness once you get into my office in a lot of cases, because it's a lot of where we live, work, play, pray that is affecting our health. So as I learned more about the environmental and social determinant impacts on our health, I shifted more toward medical journalism, and that's where I really spend a lot of my energy writing about how air pollution affects our health, how climate change affects our health. And I am here also representing the boards of GIPL, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. And I work with Anne on Georgia Clinicians for Climate Action. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And Anne, how's your audio doing right now? Are you able to introduce yourself?
It's good now. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
You can hear me now? Okay. Anyway, I'm Anne Mellinger-Birdsong, and I'm a pediatrician, and I work with mothers and others for clean air and volunteer with Georgia Clinicians for Climate Action. And I've been doing environmental health work since the 1990s.
And thank you and the other panelists just for all the wonderful work you're doing. We've got some pretty, wonderful kind of like overlapping work and just like really wonderful expertise in this Zoom room right now. So turning kind of to the air quality monitoring in Georgia, I would just love for you, Garry, to just tell us a little bit more about the Center for Sustainable Communities and how you decided to take on this air quality monitoring project.
Great question. Great question. You know what? This for me, this was not really writing a grant. This was a culmination of a long time journey. But quickly back in the day, I took a walk in the woods, and I was over at Fernbach Forest, and I came upon a tower, and I saw the tower. I looked up and said, "Wow, that thing is about 200 feet in the air. What if we could take this tower, and re-instrument it, put some instrumentation on there to measure NOx, SOx, and NO2 and SO2 and all ozone and all that kind of stuff." So I had this vision of creating the Advanced Atmospheric Monitoring and Research Station. So something we call ARMS project and such. So I knocked on the door for Fernbach Museum and said, "Hey, can I borrow your tower, for a second, and re-instrument it, with some stuff and, do some real good about air pollution." First they said no, and then they said no again. And then they kept saying no, and I kept pressing them. Then finally, they allowed me to put some instruments up there. We established the tower, there in Fernbank Forest, for a little while, for a little while, etc. There, but that's where it started. With the vision of having a research station and helping the community from not only a climate perspective, but providing weather forecasts and streaming live data into the classrooms of K-12 students about weather, about air pollution, etc. And that's where it started, And so I've always had this passion around community and air pollution and monitoring and such, and getting that data and getting folks energized, around this around this very, very important issue. Folks in minority communities are impacted by this stuff all day long because typically their communities were redlined. Interstate highways were built around them and through them and such. And they experience these air pollution elements on a daily, if not hourly basis and such. So to finally to be able to educate them, to make them aware, and to make them part of the process was what this grant was all about. And air pollution is so important to our communities, whether it be indoor or outdoor. From smog hanging over cities to the smoke inside the houses and such, air pollution poses a major threat to health and climate. And ambient outdoor air pollution in both city and rurals is caused by fine particulate matter, which results in strokes or heart disease or lung cancer or acute chronic respiratory diseases as well. That's why this is so important, and that's why this is so important to our under-resourced communities and such, because already in those communities, they're facing economic disparities, they're facing health disparities, from all sorts of things. And now we layer on top of that emissions, particularly from transportation, which further degrades their quality of life. Air pollution increases the risk of heart and respiratory diseases, as well as lung cancer. Ozone is a major factor in causing asthma and making it worse. Nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide can also cause asthma, bronchial systems, lung inflammation, and also induce lung function disorders as well. So this stuff is bad, but yet our communities really don't know about it, and that's why we wrote the grant, to better inform them, to better educate them, to get them involved, to ensure that they have ownership of this issue when it comes to air pollution, and when we already in place, there's some monitoring networks out there. There's the public network, which is put in place by the state and some cases cities and such. Well, that's kind of high cost, professionally managed, few in number monitors, etc. But the data reliability coming from those monitors is extremely high and such. And then they're the private networks, that there's the folk, and these private networks are putting in place mainly by folks like us who care about air pollution, and particularly its impact on underserved communities, and we don't have all that much money, so we use the low cost variety sensors. They're easy to operate, easy to install. They're numerous in number and such, and they're good, but they also have their limitations from an instrumentation perspective as well. They're both types of networks. They have large disparities in air quality monitoring in the Atlanta metro area. The monitors deployed by the public and private networks are predominantly north of I-20. Okay, let me set this up for you here. Again, if we look at where all the monitors are currently from a public perspective, mainly, they're located north of I-20. And what does north of I-20 look like? Well, predominantly white, predominantly affluent, social networks that understand this stuff, educated about this stuff, and have the opportunity to think about these things as well. They're not plagued by housing issues, not plagued by food disparity issues, not plagued by transportation issues. So therefore, they have the opportunity to concentrate on this. Take it to I-20 South, completely different scenario.
So we're testing in areas that we're not testing in the areas that probably need it the most.
We are testing that. Correct. We're testing the areas that probably don't need it the most. Now we're about to change that dynamic, because we're going to take things south of I-20, which reflects significant deficiencies in demographics, socioeconomic status, health outcomes, education, land use, development patterns, the list goes on and on and on, but it all leads to what? Disproportionate impacts. So the primary goals of our grant and monitoring project is to fill that void in monitoring, in Metro Atlanta, such that the folks south of I-20 again have the same opportunities as north of I-20 from education and awareness and data analysis, etc. So we want to create a private monitoring network that is capable. A private monitoring network that is as capable as a private network that currently exists north of I-20 as well.
Garry, that is just wonderful. I am really excited to dig into some of this. And since public health came up very quickly, and some of these negative health outcomes, I would love to turn to our physicians in the room. And I think the way we'll do this, we're so lucky to have two MDs on this call right now. I think I'll start with Dr. Neha to talk about kind of general health impacts, and then move to Dr. Ann to talk about the effect on children's health in particular. But to start with you, Dr. Neha, could you just speak a little more about the connection between air pollution and health in general? What kind of effects dirty air might be having on families in Georgia? how you might see these in your practice, and if you can talk a little bit more about these kind of systemic inequities and how that kind of shows up in public health. I'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah, no. So I think, Garry, thank you so much for the work you're doing. Amazing and so important. And as you said, here's why, because there's so many health impacts that people are seeing. So we know that air pollution is not just one thing. It's a toxic mix of a lot of different types of chemicals. So one of the big things we talk about is PM 2.5, which is fine particles. So these are the small particles that are generated usually through natural, but also human causes. And the biggest reason that humans have to cause it is the combustion of fossil fuels. So when that happens, these fine particles can come into our airways. And just like the wind can blow anywhere, there's really there's no way to obstruct wind from flowing everywhere. Once these particles get into our system, they don't just stop in our lungs. They're so small that they can make it down to the place where the oxygen sort of gets into our bloodstream. And so along with that, so do these fine particles. So it's not just lung damage that, like Garry was saying, that we're concerned about. We're also concerned about, once these get into our blood system, how do they cause inflammation in our bodies? So they also can inflame our blood vessels. So we know that people are at higher risk for heart attacks. They're at higher risk for strokes. It can also get through the blood-brain barrier into our brains. And so we know that there's a lot of evidence that there's higher risk for Alzheimer's disease, cognitive complications. And I'll let Anne get to this, but we know that it doesn't just happen. We don't have this pristine blood system. Even when we're in the womb, we are still being exposed to this. So there are very early effects that toxic air pollution can have on human beings. The other toxic brew we are concerned about is ozone. So that's a gas. So the way we think of masks protecting us during COVID from infectious diseases, it's really hard to find the right type of mask that's going to protect us from this toxic gas, ozone. And I'll again let Anne talk a little bit more about this, because I know she has a lot of expertise in this area. But ozone is sort of, when you're exposed to that, it's almost like getting a sunburn on your airways. So there's a lot of inflammation that can happen in our lungs because of the exposure to ozone. And so I think I'll just kind of focus on those two as sort of the biggest culprits in damaging our health. But like Garry talked about, there are also nitrogen oxides that have a lot of health impacts, volatile organic compounds. A lot of bad chemicals are released from the combustion of fossil fuels. And transportation is a big reason that the health of Georgians is affected, particularly in areas, as Garry suggested, that have been redlined. So we don't just have one source of toxic pollution, we have many. We have warehouses, diesel trucks driving through, school buses that are taking our children to school and affecting the bus drivers who are sitting there, the teachers who are picking up the kids from the school buses, and then our kids that are sitting on these school buses. So there's so many exposures, and they're sort of multiplied in areas that have not traditionally been taken care of because of redlining, that have not just not been taken care of, but have been purposefully marginalized. So I think we really, 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 like you said, need to be focused on these communities. And I'll just give one story, if I may. The way that I first got really involved in this and just did not realize that air quality monitoring wasn't as robust or as protective as I thought it was. So one of the biggest things I think as a primary care doctor is my job is to translate the science in a digestible way so that my patients can improve their health. And so for me, as I started, I learned about, through Gipple, a fire happening in South Fulton, this dumpster fire, I will say. I mean, it was basically an area that people were complaining that their eyes were burning, their noses were, I mean, they had very clear evidence of some sort of toxic chemical in the air that was impacting their health. But all the air monitoring was okay. I mean, it was within normal limits. And so the more I sort of started to learn about this, the more as a doctor, it really pained me to say, how can I tell my patients that they're safe? We don't really have robust air monitoring or air monitoring in a way that is going to show real-time information. If the monitor, it happens to not be downwind or where, because of the location of that air monitor, I can't give my patients the all clear to feel safe in these communities. And I think that really affected me as a primary care doctor. And that's what's gotten me more involved in trying to learn about how we can keep our patients, our communities, and our families safe. So I will pass it on to Dr. Ann for more insights.
Hi. So I'll just talk about children. So air pollution is really, really bad for kids. And there's a lot of studies that show that prenatal exposure when kids are in the mom's womb affects their IQ when they're 4 or 5 years old, even if that's the end of it. And they did actually a study in Mongolia where the city was pretty polluted, and they gave pregnant moms some air filters for their apartments. And the kids whose moms had the air filters had improved IQs compared to the kids whose mom didn't. And they only had because it was part of a work in progress, the moms only had the air filters while they were pregnant. And then they both, once the kids were born, they had all the same exposure at the playgrounds and everything. And it also, prenatal exposure causes low birth weight, so babies are born smaller, which can cause health problems, and causes premature birth, so they're born too early and have to spend some time in the NICU. And out in California, they discovered when they closed 8 coal plants, there were fewer premature births in those communities where the coal plants closed. So we know that, that's a real life experiment, that cleaning up the air makes us healthier. And so anyway, I'll go on to both ozone and nitrogen dioxide are known to trigger asthma attacks in kids with asthma, and they're both also highly likely to actually be involved in causing asthma. And it's hard, I don't like assigning a percentage because there's so many things like family history and air pollution, viruses, and allergies, the propensity so there's a lot of things. So I don't think we're quite at the place of being able to tease out which one is which percent, but it's definitely strongly linked. It's also linked with causing autism in kids. So prenatal and post-birth exposure both can affect rates of autism. And we know that when kids are teenagers, they grow high, their ribs get bigger, and their lungs get bigger to fill, their ribs grow bigger, there's more space in their chest, and the lungs grow just as much as their ribs and bones. And studies in Los Angeles, as the Clean Air Act took effect, was that once we cleaned up the air, the kids had better, healthier, bigger lungs just from living where it was cleaner. And the kids that lived in the dirtier communities had smaller, damaged lungs. And we had a study in Georgia that they found that kids that rode diesel school buses did worse on their fitnessgram at school compared to counties where there were fewer, or the diesels were filtered. So we can tell just, what's in the school bus affects kids' ability to exercise and their test score at the end of the year. And it's also linked with affecting mental health for kids and adults, but kids' exposure at age 10 can affect whether they're diagnosed with a psychiatric illness when they're 18. So, it has long-lasting effects, not just at the time you're exposed, but years later it affects. And there was actually in Mexico City, did some autopsies on children who died for other reasons, like they got hit by a car or something, and they found little bits of particle pollution in their brains. And these were like kids that were 5 or 6 or 7. And the air pollution had gone through their bloodstream, like Neha had talked about, and into their brains. And it was just lodged there, causing damage.
Wow.
So it's really bad for kids. And I want to add too that nitrogen dioxide, which comes when we make that when we burn things. And it doesn't matter if we're burning wood or gas or coal or biodiesel or ethanol, anything we burn, because the air is more than 3/4 of the air is nitrogen. So when we burn something, we not only make carbon dioxide, but some of the combines with the nitrogen in the air and makes nitrogen dioxide. And that causes, there's a study that showed that nitrogen dioxide causes 1.6% of all deaths in the US.
Mhm.
So, and it's really known to trigger asthma and emphysema troubles. So it's also a big thing. So that's why we like clean energy.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
And I can
mean,
also add what
go for it.
Garry was talking about, and Neha too, the monitors are, EPA, back when they started it in the 90s, they were big and expensive. And so each city got like 6 or 8 or 10, but there's a recent study in Los Angeles, this group got some portable ones and just went to neighborhoods, and they found that the pollution levels were much higher in some of the neighborhoods that were historically Black compared to where the monitor were. And they even only had to go like a few blocks, 3 or 4 or 5 blocks from the monitor, and it would be worse. And part of it's based on redlining. We knew where communities were, and we built factories and highways and put power plants where they would affect Black people more than white people. And that's just part of the structural environmental, the built environment. How we've built our country has made disparities in exposure.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so unfortunate, but it is no surprise. I am curious because it seems to be kind of a running theme, just how localized also some of this kind of exposure is. And, you might not pick up the air pollution a block away from where it's really affecting people. I'm curious, Garry, like how y'all tackle that, and if this data is going to be able to be used to kind of pick up more like kind of localized pollution, or if this is kind of creating like a general body of data kind of, how do you tackle that kind of like localized versus general knowledge of the area?
Yeah. Great question. And Ms. Ed's story took me back several decades when I was growing up in a community that was about 2 miles away from one of those creosol plants and such. And when I was growing up, you could smell the odors coming from those creosol plants. That's the creosol is the back in the day was the sealant for telephone poles and such, and the odors and the fumes and the NOx and the particles just drifted over into our community on a daily basis. We're just so used to it. We didn't know that however we inhaled it, that was hurting our lungs, and as Ms. Anter talked to us about attaching particles into our brains, et cetera, so just and again, those communities were built with intentionally, near those plants and such, within eye shot almost. But the way that I study tackles this is that we're actually going to use PM 2.5 monitors, purple air sensors, and we're going to partner with 11 schools, and those schools are located within a close proximity to I-20 and such, within 1,000 to 500 meters or so. So we've intentionally picked those schools such that we can place sensors there and operate them and sustain them, over a period of time, again, to collect that data. So again, being in close proximity to what we see as sources coming off I-20, hundreds and hundreds of trucks on a daily, if not thousands of cars on a daily basis, passing within close proper proximity to those schools, and again, looking at the effects of how that can affect the learning abilities of students in those schools as well. So we're going to partner not only with the schools but also the surrounding communities as well, because this is all about, again, them taking ownership of this issue, and that means teachers not only helping to install the monitors themselves, but we're going to develop curriculum so they're teaching about the monitors and teaching about air pollution as part of their science curriculum, etc. We're going to take students out of Georgia Tech, who is our lead research partner here and such, and marry them up with schools as well, such that they're learning about air pollution and its effect in low-income communities, and also it gives the school great resource partners as well. We're going to do this again in conjunction with the communities, again partnering with the neighborhood planning units and such that they're aware of what we're doing as well. So we're not just going to fly into the community and install some sensors. We're going to make sure, again, that we're working in collaboration and in close contact, and that it's a win-win-win for Georgia Tech, for our organization, for the communities, and also for the schools as well.
That is just wonderful. I love that this is also coming with real community engagement and engaging the schools these are being placed in. And I'm kind of curious, this, feeling of like ownership and then partnership with y'all probably, ties in with ownership over one's health. So I'm kind of curious, maybe Dr. Neha, you can speak to this, how, knowledge of the air that you're breathing can empower your patients or just like people in the community. I don't know if there's anything there, but I'm curious if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what you've touched on is the key piece of what medicine is, which is communicating risks to people, and communicating risks about things that are short-term risks and then things that are long-term risks. And how do you get people to change their behavior when it feels like this is a risk that's going to happen over the long term, right? So you have school systems where children come in, they're there for a few years, and then they move on. And as Anne talked about in the studies, a lot of the things that are happening over a long time course, right? It's like, if you think about it like smoking, you smoke, and then over years, over decades, all of that inflammation, all of that damage to the DNA catches up with you. So what you end up with is heart disease, strokes, lung cancers, many, many, many years later. So I think what's going to be really interesting with the project that you're doing, Garry, is to help people sort of connect the health impacts that are happening right then and there. So the things that a lot of people think of as nuisance symptoms. So my nose is runny, or my eyes are itchy, connecting it to more serious things like higher rates of asthma attacks in the children that are in these schools are just at higher risk for asthma to develop in the first place, and then asthma exacerbation, so the flares to happen that could lead to hospitalization and other things like that. So that's sort of like more immediate near term. And then also educating and communicating about, well, and these are some of the things that we really need to think about for our children in their future? Do we want to imagine them in a world where their lungs are just healthier, they can do all of the things that they want to do? Or do we want to imagine them in a few years develop, you know, when they're adults, when they reach our age, being at much higher risk for heart disease, to be on medicines to, you know, keep their blood pressure low, to be worried about lung cancer? Is that the kind of world we want to imagine for the kids that we're seeing and working with right now? So I think your question touches really directly at the heart of how to communicate these health risks.
Thank you. And it looks like this is wonderful. We are getting some questions in the chat, which I'll get to in just a moment. And I'll encourage anyone else on the Zoom call, if you have questions, please feel free to share those. Before we turn to those, Dr. Ann, do you have anything to add to that? You know, as we kind of think through, you know, how to communicate health risks to families and how you navigate with children and parents, I guess. Do you have anything to add in that kind of area?
That's what the place I work for Mothers and Others for Clean Air, and that's what part of what we do is we are trying to communicate that. And we have a blog we do, but we also like to just talk to people, you know, in meetings or community meetings or church groups or whatever, just to try and explain, because I don't think people realize, you know, when you see a bit of smoke coming off a fire or a factory, you know, you can see the smokestack, but then once it spreads out over the whole city, you don't really see it, you know. But you can go up on Stone Mountain and look at Atlanta and you see this haze over the city. And it's just, people don't realize how bad it is. And that even though we've cleaned up the air a lot, we can still make a lot more progress.
Yeah. And quickly, just to follow up on Ann's earlier comments about degradation of academic and educational prowess when you're exposed to air pollution. Well, so some of our early studies done by Georgia Tech, again, looking at those schools along I-20, has showed that early in our early analysis that there is some difference in test score performance. There is some difference in math proficiency, reading proficiency, looking at those students and their exposures to other students who are not exposed. So that more or less ground truths what Ann just spoke of.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Neha, yeah, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, so I think that this is really a key time where we kind of also move from gathering data to implementation, and just like that implementation science piece of it, where it's really like the funding is there, the money is there to make these improvements. Can we really make this push to switch to electric buses and be like a test case? And then we have these monitors that can show, you know, the change on a more rapid time scale, because I think we are, as a community, we have the science is there. It's been there for a long time in terms of the risks. And now we are really in this exciting time of implementation, of taking that science and translating it to action. Right. And so that's why I'm so excited for your project. I think it's great to have the sensors, but it's amazing that there's this funding to make this case to say, okay, so let us be that pilot that shows you when we get these electric buses, look at how the numbers change from the air quality monitors to our testing, you know, and since you're going to be following them longitudinally over time, just we are now implementation scientists, not just sort of scientists that are looking for, well, what's the impact? We've got a lot of that data. It's how are we changing things?
Yeah. And I think another wonderful thing about the project is it really does feel like gathering data and implementation at the same time, since you're already engaging the community through that process. So we've had a couple questions in the chat I definitely want to try to get to, and I think a couple of these will probably be more geared towards you, Garry. Christilia asked in the chat, where can we go to find air pollution data for our state, city, and county level to make cases to government? Is there valuable data that already exists that people can use for their advocacy work that you have any suggestions about?
Well, I would say start with the Purple Air Sensor Network. That those are in place already, and you can go there and see the monitors in place with around the state and as well as in the metro area. Also the EPA maintains databases for the 6 criteria air pollutants as well, and the state is a great resource as well.
And I know for my county, I've used the American Lung Association page as well. That's helpful. And Garry, one other question for you in the chat is, when do you anticipate having the data from these new monitors available to the public?
Well, we had a nice timeline and such, but we love the EPA gave us the award and such, but our timeline has slipped a bit. So I would say now we're looking perhaps maybe by the fall.
Honestly, that is faster than I expected you to say, because I wouldn't have been surprised, just given the nature of this data, if this was something that people rolled out over a period of years. So, I mean, that's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
I know you probably want it right away.
Again, to start the data collection and such, I would say the fall. But our entire aim here again is to empower the community and to share that data, and that they take ownership of the data as well, and perhaps perform some of their own analysis, and also propose corrective actions as well.
Wonderful. And this is just great. I mean, thank you all so much for being a part of this. This has been a wonderful conversation. If any of the other folks on this Zoom call have questions, then I think you're able to raise your hands in the webinar. Feel free to, and I can call on you, or feel free to put more questions in the chat if you have them. Christilia, I'm going to try to unmute you. Let me know if that works.
I think it works. What was that, Garry? What was that first site that you listed? I have the ones that I'm the one with the question about the data. So that first site, I totally did not hear you on the first one.
Okay. I would say go to the Purple Air Sensor Network website, and then look up our zip code and area and such, and it will show you the sensor deployment for the area and such, and you can see the data that's being collected. But also, again, there's the EPA. There's the state and a number of other sources as well. EPA has a wonderful website which lists all kinds of resources concerning air pollutions, including sources of data.
Okay, because I'm actually on the coast, so I'm not. I'm in Savannah. So we're trying to vastly do the same thing, probably like how your organization is doing, maybe not as detailed, but we do see that we do need to have air monitoring. I think we have a couple, but very few people that are willing to take on the task of that. I'm not only an advocate, I'm a local business consultant here. Trying to, with the cities that are surrounding Savannah, because Savannah has an influent area, and then they have areas that are not so. But then when you go further south towards Brunswick, it's a lot of areas that are more other than the military, where you get this stuff done. They have industrial hygienists. We don't normally have that inside the health departments and stuff. So being a retired military, I decided to start my consultancy, and I'm just trying to, do my part. I moved back to the South because, when I grew up, I had clean air. So, and I have a daughter. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. What started for me was a passion around increasing education and awareness of air pollution, wanting to build the Arms Project, finding partners and networks who would help me with that as well. Now there's also a way to do this through an entity called a Thriving Earth Exchange. Okay. That's an entity that will provide you with money and resources to help get you started.
Okay.
Concerning your building out your sensor network and finding resources, and also marrying you up with the scientists as well. Again, that's called the Thriving Communities. Thriving Communities Network and such. Look them up online. But again, they give you funding, they give you resources, they marry you up with the scientists, and also get you started as well. That's what they do.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
those questions and for that conversation, y'all. I want to go to another question.
Can I add? I put a bunch of links into the chat.
Yes, thank you.
The state air data and the EPA, and I put my emails because the first time you use some of the EPA sites, it's a little tricky figuring out you have to choose years and which pollutant and which city. But you can go in, like it has Atlanta and Macon and Columbus and Savannah. So you can do it for any city you want in Georgia that's big enough to. They even have Augusta, which is a pretty small,
yeah. Thank you for sharing those resources, Dr. Ann. That's wonderful. And I may share those after this call as well. Let's take this one last question and then close out. You all can share any calls to action that you may have. So the last question I see in the chat is, what can people do to mitigate their exposure to air pollution, both outside and indoor air? So whoever feels compelled to speak to this question, feel free to hop in.
I'll go on. So the thing with outdoor air pollution, it depends on what it is, because like ozone forms new every day. So by 2 p.m. it's building up. So if it's one of the ozone alert days, the best thing to do is get your exercise or take the kids to the playground or do whatever you can in the morning before it's had a chance to build up. Or, if you're older and you stay up late, to do it after like 9 p.m. at night. If you live where it's safe, where you can go to a gym. With particle pollution, it's generally the same all day because it's due to either lots of traffic, which is always there, or a wildfire, which is going on for several days or something. And for that, the best thing is to be inside where it's filtered. And if you can do it, you can buy an air filter to filter the particles out. There's multiple brands, or there's one called a Corsi Rosenthal box, where you just take furnace filters and tape them together really well with duct tape so that the air is sealed out, and tape them to just a regular box fan. And that's a lower cost way of doing it yourself. And, depending on where you live, every few months or every year, you have to put a new batch of air filters together. But, you end up with this box that's about 2 feet square, the size of whatever. You buy 5 air filters that will match your fan, and you just put duct tape. But the filters don't work for gases like ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide are all just gas. They're like, 2 or 3 molecules, and they'll get through anything. So it's just best to work on getting clean energy and clean transportation. So because it's not like a point source, like when you smoke a cigarette, you can choose to put it in your mouth or not. But with air pollution and all the trucks, the trains, the off-road vehicles, we have to work. That takes policy, and that's why we all need to be writing. And even if you think the politician doesn't care so much, it's really important from them to hear from a lot of people that I want to be healthy and I want you to support getting clean vehicles or getting the power plants to switch to solar arrays instead of natural gas, things like that, because it affects everybody's health.
Yeah.
And I can just add a couple of things if that's okay. So just like Anne, I like to think about it from the personal level. So what can you do for yourself right now today? So that's if you're able, air filters in the home, if you're cooking with a gas stove or any kind of cooking really is going to release particles. If you have an exhaust system, turn that on. If you don't, a fan, at least increase ventilation of the air.
Crack the window too.
Yes,
exactly.
Exactly.
If
it's so
nice
personal
weather, open it wide, and even when it's cold, just crack it like a 1/4 inch and let fresh air come in.
So ventilation in the home, I think that's for sort of indoor air quality, outdoor air quality. Check to see what the air quality is like. We know from this discussion that it's not perfect, but at least it gives you a general sense of what your day is going to look like. So whether you want the kids to be outside playing all day, or if you're going to really time it appropriately so that, like Anne said, sometimes it's safer to do early morning walks and exercise. You also can talk community level actions. You can talk to your schools and just say, can we have a no idling policy so that when our kids are getting in and out of the school bus or getting dropped off to school, can we please make sure that cars are not just sitting there, buses are not just sitting there releasing these toxic fumes in front of our teachers and our children. And then it really does become sort of higher level action of just, we want to protect our health, and whatever you think the message for your local leaders may be that is going to be more impactful, trying to message it in a way that's more impactful for them. And usually health messages are those types of messages. So really just kind of honing in on that and thinking about the long-term risks. And I always talk about that because I've learned that from Anne about gases. There's not a point source. They're just everywhere. You can't see them. So it's really going to be about higher level action.
Yeah. Thank you for those answers,
y'all. One thing, like, I want to add one more thing, like, not using energy is the quickest way to clean up the air. So like turning off your computers at night or, even just like insulating your house, caulking it. If you can do that, if you live in a place where you're able to, will really reduce your use of electricity in the summer for air conditioning, either electric or gas.
Yeah.
That you use in the winter. And there's all these rebates and tax credits coming out right now for people to replace their gas furnace with heat pump.
Heat pumps, right.
And to replace their gas stove with an electric or an electric induction stove. And there's also working on creating incentives for apartment owners so that, you live in an apartment, you're not going to go spend $800 on a stove when you might move in a year. But
thanks for those answers, y'all. I'm sorry to
creating the organizations that can help the landlords do this, or there's some incentives for the landlords themselves, because that will, not only does the gas stove affect the air in the apartment, but it also goes outside and adds to the general background pollution. And furnaces are also really big in terms of air pollution, because we probably use like 20 to 50 times as much gas for furnaces as we do for a stove in a given year.
Wow. I'm gonna have to, I just want to be mindful of the time, y'all. That was all so helpful. And I also want to point out, how the personal kind of watching out for you and your own family does seem to kind of expand towards advocacy often and taking advantage of programs the EPA has made available. So protecting yourself and your kids and just connecting to your community turns into advocacy very quickly. So I just want to thank you all for those wonderful ideas. And just to be, we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to make sure we make space to close out. And so each of you can give any final kind of calls to action or plug any work that you have ongoing. So maybe we can kind of go in reverse order of the way we started with intros. And Dr. Neha, as we close, if anyone wants to learn more about what you're doing or get more involved, what should they look out for? How can they find you or any more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you are interested and able, following the work of GIPL is fantastic. We are really trying to work across the state, and we have folks working along the coast as well. So that would be a great way to get involved. We have a Green Team Summit coming up February 26th to Sharp. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm very bad with dates on a Sunday. So we would love to continue this type of engagement amongst our faith communities as well. And I can also put my email in the chat. I continue to write about health and air pollution, climate change. So I'm happy to share any stories that I write with everybody.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Ann, same to you as we close. How can people learn more about Mothers and Others or other work that you're involved in? You might be muted. One moment.
I'm muted.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're good.
So I'm putting it in the chat. We have a website and we have a section on it called Latest Headlines, where we do a blog about whenever new studies come out showing the health benefits of air pollution. And we also put in action alerts. Like right now, EPA is reconsidering their standards for particulate air pollution. And so in another week or so, we'll put up the link for that. We're working on our information to put along with it. But that's something right now, because particulate, it comes from burning things mostly and industrial processes. So if they tighten their standards, then we'll all be healthier.
Thank you so much. And thanks for uplifting that. I mean, if anyone watching this webinar right now wants to take a quick action, submitting a comment to the EPA about their soot or particle pollution standard is a really great thing that you can do that makes an impact right now.
And I also want to say,
Go ahead, Ann. Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I yield to you.
Also follow us on Twitter, because we tend to put some things out there that doesn't rise to the level of putting 3 paragraphs on our website. And so if there's something quick that comes up, we put it out on our Twitter or Facebook.
Perfect.
And we're on Spoutable now too, if people want to, because I don't know how long Twitter's going to last.
Yes.
For
now,
the most quickest and most
Twitter,
responsive.
yes.
But it's been very useful, but it seems to be not working for several hours at a time occasionally. So
yes. Garry, you have the last word.
Collapse.
If you have any final thoughts or just ways people can learn more about your project.
Sure. Quickly here, imagine living in a community where on the north side there's an interstate highway, and it's there because of redlining. Imagine living in a community where on the south side there's a railroad track. Imagine living in a community where on the west side there's warehousing, logistics, and diesels. Imagine living in a community where on the north side there's a brand new development that's increasing traffic flow. Imagine living again in a community where on the southeast side there's port operations, with all sorts of trucks running back and forth between ships. Those things exist. Those communities are being impacted on a daily basis. Those scenarios are real. We need to be bold. We need to take action. We need to speak up, and we need to ensure that policies are in place that push back against disparities created by redlining, that push back against the development that encroaches on communities and increases traffic flow, that pushes back on increased freight rail and such, that pushes back on locating warehouses and logistical centers close to the communities and such. Take action, be bold, speak up. And you can reach me at Garry Harris, G Harris, at htsenterprise.com. Go to our website and such. Would love to partner with you. On these important projects.
Thank you so much. That was really powerful, Garry. And I'm just so excited to have learned a little bit more about this project and start hearing what you find in the fall and what you kind of build in these community kind of engagements with these schools. That's all we have today. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. This was absolutely wonderful. This was live streamed on the GIPL page and the Mom's Facebook page. So if you need to access this conversation again, you can find it there. And I'll be tweeting it out again also on the Mom's Clean Air Force page. But thanks so much, y'all. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. And thanks for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you, everybody.